The dust kicked up around Captain Sarah Chin's boots as she stepped off the transport vehicle at Forward Operating Base Kandahar, 3 equipment cases secured to her pack frame. The Afghan sun hammered down on the compound while she made her way toward the command building, her orders folded in her chest pocket. A specialist at the gate had pointed her toward Commander David Brooks's office without making eye contact. She found Brooks behind a metal desk covered in requisition forms and tactical maps, his face creased with the permanent squint of someone who'd spent too many years in desert postings. He glanced up from her file as she entered and snapped a salute. Brooks returned it with minimal effort, his attention already back on the papers. "So you're the sniper they sent us," he said, flipping through her service record. "Chun, West Point, then straight to Scout Sniper School." Impressive on paper. She maintained her position at attention. "Thank you, sir." He closed the folder and leaned back in his chair. "I'll be honest with you, Captain. I've had 3 female soldiers in specialist roles rotate through this unit in the past 2 years. Every single one requested transfer within 6 months. You know why? No, sir. Because they couldn't handle the standards we maintain here," Brooks said, his tone carrying the weight of settled fact. "This isn't some training facility where everyone gets a participation trophy. We have real missions with real consequences." Chun kept her expression neutral. "I understand, sir. My record shows 37 confirmed kills across 2 deployments, including 3 over 1,000 meters. Brooks waved his hand dismissively. "Everyone's got impressive numbers until they're actually in the field with my unit. We'll see how those statistics hold up." He stood and moved toward the door. "Get yourself settled in the barracks. We'll do a gear inspection at 1500 hours. The barracks smelled of gun oil and boot leather, 4 bunks lining each wall with footlockers beneath them. Chun claimed an empty rack near the window and began unpacking her equipment cases with methodical precision. The first 2 contained standard issue gear, uniforms and body armor and ammunition pouches arranged exactly as regulation specified. The third case held her custom rifle. She lifted the weapon carefully, running her hands along the modified barrel. The M110 platform had been completely rebuilt over 3 years of testing and refinement. Custom barrel with hand-lapped bore, match-grade trigger group, and specialized optics that had cost more than some soldiers made in 6 months. Every component had been selected and fitted to create a system capable of consistent accuracy at ranges where standard rifles became unreliable. Brooks entered the barracks without knocking, 2 sergeants trailing behind him for the inspection. His eyes went immediately to the rifle in Chen's hands, and his expression shifted from professional indifference to open mockery. "When the hell is that supposed to be?" Chun set the weapon on her bunk. "My primary rifle, sir. Custom built for extended range engagements." Brooks picked it up, examining it with the exaggerated care of someone handling a child's toy. "This looks like something you put together in your garage. We use standard issue equipment in this unit, Captain. Not hobby shop nonsense." Sergeant Marcus Webb stood near the door, his attention focused on the rifle's actual specifications rather than Brooks's commentary. He noticed the custom barrel threading, the precision-machined receiver, the high-end optics that cost more than Brooks apparently realized. "That rifle is built to military specifications with documented performance data," Chun said, keeping her voice level. "The custom components compensate for wind drift and elevation changes at distances exceeding 900 meters. Brooks set the rifle down with deliberate carelessness. "I don't care what your paperwork says. This weapon is not standard issue, which means it hasn't been properly vetted for combat operations." He turned to one of the sergeants. "Log this as non-compliant equipment pending review." "Sir," Chun said, "that rifle has been used in 17 combat missions across my previous deployment." Brooks cut her off with a sharp gesture. "I'm confiscating this pending equipment compliance review. You'll be issued a standard M110 from our armory. And since you seem to need time to adjust to how we do things here, I'm assigning you to supply inventory duty instead of putting you in the sniper rotation. We can't have people on Overwatch who think the rules don't apply to them." Webb watched Chen's face remain perfectly calm as Brooks walked out carrying her rifle, the other sergeant following with the documentation. The commander's boots echoed down the hallway, while Chun stood beside her bunk, her expression revealing nothing. 3 hours later, Chun sat in the supply office completing her formal request to retrieve the weapon. She detailed the rifle's specifications, attached copies of her performance data from previous missions, and cited the regulation allowing specialized equipment for operators with documented expertise. She submitted the request through the digital system at 1600 hours. Brooks denied it at 1630 with a response that consisted of 3 words and his signature. Request denied. Insufficient justification. Webb found Chun in the supply depot that evening, counting ammunition crates. He leaned against the doorframe until she looked up from her clipboard. "I saw your rifle before he took it," Webb said. "That's serious equipment. Real precision work." Chun returned to her count, marking numbers on the form. 3 years of development and testing. It's designed for the kind of shots standard rifles can't make reliably. Webb nodded slowly. Brooks doesn't like people who show him up, even accidentally. Had a demolitions expert last year who suggested a better breach technique. Brooks sent him a gate duty for a month. Chun finished the count and set down her clipboard. "I'm not here to show anyone up, Sergeant. I'm here to do my job." Webb pushed off from the doorframe. "Yeah, well, your job just became counting boxes because Brooks decided your expertise made him look bad. Welcome to FOB Kandahar." He walked out into the evening heat, leaving Chun alone among the supply crates. She looked down at the ammunition inventory, boxes of standard rounds that would never achieve the precision her custom loads provided. Somewhere in Brooks's office, her rifle sat confiscated, its capabilities dismissed by someone who'd never fired a shot past 700 meters. Chun picked up her clipboard and continued counting, her expression revealing nothing about the calculations already forming in her mind. "Where are you watching from? And does your state have a strong military tradition?" The supply depot smelled of cardboard and cosmoline, rows of metal shelving stretching back into shadows where the overhead lights didn't quite reach. Chun moved through her second day of inventory duty with mechanical efficiency, clipboard in hand, as she counted ammunition boxes. She pulled a crate of M110 rounds from the middle shelf and noted the lot number, then paused when she saw the manufacturing date and specification label. Standard ball ammunition, 7.62 NATO, with no match grade designation. She checked 3 more crates and found the same thing. The unit's entire ammunition supply consisted of basic military loads, adequate for general-purpose shooting, but lacking the consistency needed for precision work at extended distances. Chun marked the inventory sheet and moved to the next section, her mind cataloging the limitation. By mid-morning, she'd worked her way to the records desk near the front of the depot, where previous inventory logs sat stacked in manila folders. She pulled the range qualification reports from the most recent quarterly review, flipping through pages of scores and distances. The unit's longest confirmed hit during qualifications was 680 meters, recorded by a staff sergeant named Mitchell, who'd since rotated stateside. Most shooters had maxed out around 500 to 600 meters. Chun set the reports aside and returned to counting, her hands moving through familiar motions while her thoughts tracked patterns. Standard ammunition, limited range qualifications, and a commander who'd confiscated the one weapon system capable of extending that envelope. The pieces formed a picture of a unit operating well below its potential capability. Webb found her during the lunch hour, carrying 2 trays from the mess hall. He set one down on the desk beside her inventory sheets without asking permission. "Figured you might want to eat something that isn't from MRE." Chun accepted the tray with a nod. "Thank you, Sergeant." He pulled up a metal folding chair and started on his own food. "So how's inventory duty treating you? Find anything interesting in all those boxes?" "Just ammunition counts and qualification records." Chun took a bite of the overcooked chicken, chewing methodically. "Your unit's range work stops at 700 meters. Webb shrugged. "That's about as far as the standard rifles will shoot accurately in these conditions. Wind plays hell with anything past that distance." Chun set down her fork. "What's your background, Sergeant?" "Deployment history? 2 tours in Iraq, 1 in Afghanistan before this rotation." infantry, then moved to reconnaissance when they needed someone who could read terrain. Webb gestured with his fork toward her tray. You didn't just inventory those records. You analyzed them. Chen met his eyes directly. I had 3 confirmed kills over 1,000 meters during my last deployment. One at 1,137 meters in crosswind conditions that would have made standard equipment useless. My custom rifle compensates for wind drift at extended range through barrel harmonics and custom load development. Every component is tuned to create consistent accuracy where standard systems fail. Webb stopped eating. 1,100 meters. That's nearly 3/4 of a mile. The wind was gusting 15 to 20 miles per hour from the northwest. Chin said, her voice taking on the precision of someone reciting technical specifications. Standard ammunition would have drifted nearly 6 feet at that range. My custom loads reduce wind sensitivity by 30% through optimized bullet design and velocity. The barrel harmonics dampen vibration that causes vertical dispersion. The result is consistent half-minute accuracy at ranges where standard rifles are delivering 3 to 4-minute groups. Webb set down his tray and leaned back in his chair. And Brooks locked that rifle in his office because it wasn't standard issue. Chen returned to her food without responding, but Webb saw the slight tightening around her eyes that confirmed everything he needed to know. He finished eating in silence, then gathered both trays. That evening, Webb made his way to the records room in the admin building, pulling mission reports from the past 6 months. He spread them across the table and started reading, tracking patterns in the terrain and engagement distances. The area around FOB Kandahar featured elevated ridgelines and compounds positioned on high ground, natural defensive positions that provided commanding views of approach routes. He pulled out a topographical map and marked engagement sites from the reports, then measured distances using the map scale. Multiple positions showed ranges between 750 and 950 meters. The pattern became clear after 20 minutes of review. Their area of operations regularly presented scenarios requiring shots at distances where the unit's equipment became marginal. Webb found the after-action report from a mission 3 months prior. A patrol had taken fire from an elevated position at estimated 820 meters. The sniper team had engaged but failed to neutralize the threat, forcing the patrol to withdraw under fire. 2 soldiers had been wounded during the extraction. The report listed the outcome as equipment limitation, terrain advantage to enemy. He photographed the relevant pages with his phone, then returned the files to their proper order. On his way out, he passed Brooks in the hallway. "Working late, Sergeant?" Brooks asked, his tone suggesting the question wasn't casual. "Just reviewing submission reports, sir. Trying to understand the operational environment better." Brooks nodded slowly. "Make sure you understand our procedures and capabilities. We work within our established parameters for good reason. Can't have people getting creative and putting the unit at risk." Webb maintained his professional expression. "Understood, sir." He continued down the hallway, aware of Brooks watching until he turned the corner. The next morning, Webb submitted a formal request for extended range training, citing the terrain analysis and previous engagement reports. He outlined a program that would push shooters past 700 meters using existing equipment, building capability through better technique and training rather than new gear. The request sat in Brooks's inbox for 2 hours before coming back denied. Brooks called Webb into his office that afternoon. The commander sat behind his desk with the request form in front of him, his expression somewhere between annoyed and dismissive. "I appreciate initiative, Sergeant, but this proposal shows a fundamental misunderstanding of our equipment capabilities. Our M110 rifles are adequate for any mission we'll face in this area. The limitations you're describing are shooter limitations, not equipment limitations." Webb kept his voice level. "Sir, the after-action report from March specifically notes equipment limitation as a factor in a failed engagement at 820 meters." Brooks waved the comment away. "That was a training issue. The shooter didn't properly compensate for wind and elevation. Our equipment is more than sufficient when used correctly by properly trained personnel. With respect, sir, The terrain analysis shows multiple elevated positions at ranges exceeding 800 meters. If we can't reliably engage at those distances, we're giving enemy combatants a sanctuary. Brooks stood, his posture shifting to something more aggressive. Sergeant Webb, I've been running combat operations for 15 years. I know what this unit needs and doesn't need. We don't need specialized training for scenarios that rarely occur. We don't need people second-guessing established procedures. And we especially don't need anyone encouraging this fantasy that we're somehow unprepared. Request denied. Dismissed. Webb saluted and left the office, passing Chun in the hallway outside. She was carrying another requisition form, probably her third attempt to retrieve her rifle. They made eye contact briefly, and Webb saw the same controlled frustration he felt reflected in her expression. That night Webb sat in the barracks, cleaning his rifle, the familiar ritual of disassembly and reassembly giving his hands something to do while his mind worked through the problem. Brooks had created a gap between the unit's capabilities and the operational requirements, then refused to acknowledge it existed. The commander's ego had become a vulnerability that would eventually cost lives. Webb just didn't know when or how badly. Colonel Patricia Morrison stood in the intelligence briefing room at 0600 hours, studying the map projected on the wall screen. Red markers indicated suspected hostile activity patterns over the past 2 weeks, concentrated in the ridgeline areas northeast of the base. A young lieutenant named Harrison stood beside the screen with a laser pointer. We received intelligence from a local informant approximately 4 hours ago, Harrison said, tapping a location on the map. Armed group planning an attack on the civilian contractor compound here. The compound houses 6 American contractors working on infrastructure projects. Intelligence suggests the attack could happen within the next 24 to 48 hours. Morrison moved closer to the screen, examining the compound's position. What's the security situation at that location? Minimal, ma'am. The contractors have private security, but it's a small team. For guards, basic training, adequate for deterring opportunistic crime, but not a coordinated assault. Harrison zoomed the map to show terrain features. The compound sits in a valley with elevated positions on 3 sides. Natural choke point with single access road. Morrison traced the ridge lines with her finger, already calculating fields of fire and approach routes. Distance from our position, 8 kilometers northeast. We can have a quick reaction force there in 15 minutes by ground, 10 by air if we use helicopters. She nodded and pulled out her phone, checking the roster of available personnel. Get Commander Brooks in here immediately. He'll develop the tactical response plan. I want options on my desk within 2 hours. Brooks arrived 20 minutes later, his uniform still showing wrinkle marks from sleep. He reviewed the intelligence summary while Morrison laid out her priorities. 6 American lives, Commander. That's the mission. Get them out safely or ensure they can hold position until we neutralize the threat. Brooks studied the map for several minutes, zooming in and out to examine terrain details. He pulled up the compound layout on a tablet, reviewing the building positions and defensive features. The contractors have fortified the main building somewhat. Reinforced doors, basic ballistic protection on windows. If they barricade inside, they can hold for a limited time. How limited? Morrison asked. Depends on what the attackers bring. Small arms fire, maybe an hour or 2. RPGs or heavy weapons, significantly less. Brooks marked positions on the map with his stylus. I'll position our QRF here at the compound perimeter, establish defensive positions, and place sniper teams on these elevated points for overwatch. Morrison examined his marks. What's the distance from those sniper positions to the likely threat locations? Brooks checked the map scale. Approximately 800 to 950 meters to the ridge lines where attackers would have cover and concealment. And our sniper teams can engage effectively at those ranges? Brooks straightened slightly, his posture defensive. Our M110 platforms are rated for effective engagement out to 800 meters. With skilled shooters, we can push that to 900 in optimal conditions. Morrison's eyes narrowed. What about non-optimal conditions? Wind, elevation changes, heat distortion. Our shooters are trained to compensate for environmental factors. Brooks's tone carried the edge of someone whose expertise had been questioned. We've conducted successful Overwatch operations at these ranges multiple times. Morrison let it pass, but made a mental note. Get your tactical plan finalized and submit it for approval. Include contingencies for various threat scenarios. And Brooks, if there's any doubt about our capability to protect those contractors, I want to know now, not when rounds are flying. No doubt, ma'am. We're prepared for this mission. In the supply depot, Chun was restocking medical supplies when she heard voices in the hallway outside. She recognized Brooks's voice and the sharper tones of Lieutenant Harrison discussing the intelligence briefing. She moved closer to the door, not hiding, but not announcing her presence either. The compound sits in a natural kill zone, Harrison was saying. Anyone attacking from those ridgelines will have perfect fields of fire down into the valley. Our people will be exposed during any extraction attempt. That's why we established Sniper Overwatch first, Brooks replied. We suppress those elevated positions before moving the QRF in. Standard tactical procedure. Chen's mind automatically processed the scenario. Compound in valley, elevated positions at extended range, need for precision fire to suppress threats before friendly forces moved into the open. It was exactly the type of engagement her rifle had been designed for, and exactly the type of scenario where standard equipment would struggle. She stepped into the hallway. Sir, may I ask about the ranges involved? Brooks turned, his expression shifting from professional focus to irritation. Captain Chun, shouldn't you be conducting inventory? I just finished the medical supply count. Chun kept her voice neutral. I overheard discussion of elevated positions. Where the engagement distances? Brooks crossed his arms. That's not your concern. You're not on the sniper rotation, remember? You're on supply duty because you haven't learned to follow unit procedures. Chun held his gaze. With respect, sir, if those distances exceed 800 meters, standard M110 systems will have difficulty achieving first-round hits in field conditions. Wind drift alone at 900 meters can cause misses of 3 to 4 feet with standard ammunition. Brooks took a step closer, his voice dropping to something harder. Are you questioning my tactical planning, Captain? Because it sounds like you're suggesting I don't know how to employ my own sniper teams. I'm offering tactical assessment based on ballistic reality, sir. At extended ranges, equipment limitations become significant factors in mission success. Harrison glanced between them, clearly uncomfortable with the exchange. Brooks's jaw tightened as he formulated his response. Your tactical assessment is not requested or required. Brooks emphasized each word separately. The mission planning is complete, and it doesn't involve you or your hobby shop rifle. You will continue your assigned duties in supply and stay out of tactical operations. If I hear you interfering in planning again, I'll write you up for insubordination. Are we clear? Chun maintained her position. Yes, sir. Clear. Brooks turned and walked away, Harrison following after a brief, apologetic glance at Chun. She stood in the hallway for a moment, calculating distances and wind values in her head, seeing the mission unfold with perfect clarity. 800 to 950 meters with standard ammunition and rifles not zeroed for those specific ranges. Environmental factors that would push even skilled shooters to the limits of their equipment. And 6 American contractors, depending on shots that might not connect when they mattered most. She returned to the supply depot and pulled out her personal notebook, sketching the tactical scenario from memory. The compound layout, the ridgeline positions, the distances involved. She calculated holdovers for various ranges, assuming standard ammunition and typical wind conditions. The numbers told a clear story. Standard equipment could make those shots, but the margin for error was thin to non-existent. Chun closed the notebook and returned it to her cargo pocket. Somewhere in Brooks's office, her custom rifle sat locked away, a precision instrument capable of making those shots with reliability that standard equipment couldn't match. The irony was sharp enough to cut. The one person in the unit with the exact capability this mission required had been benched over procedural stubbornness and wounded ego. She finished restocking the medical supplies and moved on to counting ration boxes, her hands performing familiar tasks while her mind tracked trajectories and wind values. The contractors didn't know their lives might depend on equipment that couldn't quite reach them, or on a commander too proud to admit his limitations. Chun counted another box and marked her clipboard, the numbers stark and certain as ballistic mathematics. The radio call came at 0430 hours, cutting through the pre-dawn silence like a blade. Morrison sat up in her quarters as the duty officer's voice crackled through emergency channels. Contact at civilian contractor compound. Multiple hostiles engaging from elevated positions. 6 American contractors barricaded in main building requesting immediate assistance. Morrison pulled on her uniform while keying her radio. Get Commander Brooks and the quick reaction force mobilized now. I want tactical in the command center in 5 minutes. She grabbed her gear and headed for the door, boots pounding against concrete as she crossed the compound. The command center hummed with activity when she arrived. Brooks stood at the main display, coordinating the response, while staff officers pulled up drone footage and communications logs. Morrison moved to his side, scanning the tactical display that showed the compound layout and friendly force positions. QRF is rolling in 3 minutes, Brooks reported. 2 sniper teams, 2 fire teams, medic and command element. We'll establish perimeter and suppress hostile positions from the ridgelines. Morrison studied the drone feed, showing muzzle flashes from 4 distinct locations on the surrounding high ground. Give me distance measurements to those firing positions. A young specialist worked the controls, overlaying range markers on the display. Position 1, 870 meters. Position 2, 890 meters. Position 3, 920 meters. Position 4, 940 meters approximately. Morrison's jaw tightened, but she kept her voice level. Understood. Brooks, your sniper teams are cleared to engage the moment they have solutions. The quick reaction force convoy departed 6 minutes after the initial alert, for vehicles racing through the darkness toward the compound. Brooks rode in the lead vehicle, his tactical radio alive with updates from the base and distress calls from the contractors. Gunfire echoed across the valley as they approached, the distinctive crack of AK-47s punctuated by heavier weapons. They established a perimeter 300 meters from the compound, using the natural terrain for cover. Brooks positioned his 2 sniper teams on elevated ground that provided clear lines of sight to the hostile positions. Staff Sergeant Mitchell took the primary position with his spotter, a corporal named Hayes. Sergeant First Class Ramirez set up the secondary position 50 meters away with his own spotter. Mitchell ranged the first hostile position through his scope. 870 meters, wind right to left approximately 10 miles per hour, temperature 32 degrees. He made his adjustments, compensating for the distance and environmental factors as he'd been trained. The crosshairs settled on the muzzle flash location where a hostile fighter moved between rocks. He squeezed the trigger and watched through the scope as the round impacted low and left, striking the rocky ground 40 meters short of the target. The bullet had dropped more than he'd calculated, the wind drift pushing it further offline than his holdover had compensated for. Rounds falling short, Mitchell reported over the radio. Adjusting hold, he dialed his elevation turret up and added more windage, his second shot breaking 20 seconds later. This round came closer but still impacted 15 meters below the target position, the hostile fighter unaffected and continuing to fire down at the compound. Ramirez engaged the second position at 890 meters, his results matching Mitchell's. The standard ammunition lacked the velocity and ballistic coefficient to maintain consistent trajectory at these extended ranges, environmental factors compounding the difficulty. Both sniper teams fired multiple rounds with minimal effect, their bullets chewing up rock and dirt around the hostile positions, but failing to neutralize the threats. Brooks watched through his binoculars, frustration building as his teams expended ammunition without results. The contractors remained pinned in the main building, their situation growing more desperate with each passing minute. Heavy caliber rounds punched through windows and door frames, the defensive position deteriorating under sustained fire. "We need to suppress those positions," Brooks growled into his radio. "Adjust your holds and keep firing." Webb crouched beside Mitchell's position, observing the impacts through his spotting scope. The rounds were hitting in a pattern that showed consistent undershoot, the standard ammunition simply not carrying enough energy to fight gravity and wind at these distances. He keyed his radio to Brooks's frequency. "Sir, we're not getting hits at these ranges. Request permission to call for Captain Chun and her custom rifle." Brooks's response came sharp and immediate. "Negative. Continue engagement with current assets." "Sir, the standard loads can't reach effectively. Chen's rifle is built specifically for this scenario." Brooks cut him off. "I said negative, Sergeant. We will complete this mission with our authorized equipment. That custom rifle hasn't been vetted for combat operations, and I'm not gambling American lives on untested gear. Your teams need to execute better." Webb watched another round from Mitchell's position fall short by 30 meters, the hostile fighter adjusting his position but remaining in the fight. The logic was backwards, and everyone knew it. They were already gambling lives, betting on equipment that demonstrably couldn't make the required shots. Morrison listened to the radio exchange from the command center, her attention locked on the drone feed showing the developing crisis. The contractors had ceased returning fire from the building, likely conserved ammunition or dealing with casualties. The hostile positions continued engaging with impunity, knowing the American sniper teams couldn't reach them effectively. She pulled Chen's service record on her computer, scanning through the deployment history and performance evaluations. 3 silver stars for marksmanship, 37 confirmed kills, longest at 1,137 meters. Specialized training in long-range precision shooting. Custom rifle development over 3 years of testing and refinement. Morrison keyed her radio to Brooks's command frequency. "Commander Brooks, this is Colonel Morrison. I'm monitoring the tactical situation. What's your assessment?" Brooks's voice carried tension beneath the professional veneer. "We're engaging hostile positions, but encountering difficulty at these extended ranges. Working to adjust fire and neutralize threats. Your sniper teams have been engaging for 12 minutes without effect." Morrison let the statement hang in the air for a moment. "I'm reviewing Captain Chen's file. Her experience and equipment appear directly applicable to this scenario. Ma'am, that rifle hasn't been properly vetted. I can't authorize unproven equipment in an active combat situation." Morrison's voice dropped to something colder. "Commander, you have 6 Americans taking fire from positions your current assets cannot effectively engage. I'm not asking for your authorization. Stand by." She switched frequencies and contacted the base armory. "This is Colonel Morrison. I need Captain Sarah Chun located and equipped for immediate deployment. And I need the custom rifle from Commander Brooks's office retrieved and delivered to her within 5 minutes. This is Priority Alpha." Morrison left the command center and walked quickly to the administrative building, pulling her master key to access Brooks's office. She found the custom rifle locked in his equipment cage, exactly where Chun had said it would be. Morrison examined it briefly, noting the quality of the components and the precision of the assembly. This wasn't hobby work. This was professional-grade equipment built by someone who understood ballistics at an expert level. She carried the rifle to the armory, where Chun arrived 3 minutes later, her expression controlled, but her eyes showing the sharp focus of someone shifted into operational mode. Morrison handed her the weapon without preamble. 6 Americans under fire at a compound 8 kilometers northeast. Hostile positions at ranges from 870 to 940 meters. Our standard sniper teams cannot make the shots. Can you? Chun accepted the rifle and conducted a rapid function check, her hands moving through practice motions. "Yes, ma'am. I'll need my custom match ammunition for my footlocker and 3 minutes to verify 0. You have 2 minutes, and the ammunition is already being retrieved." Morrison's voice carried absolute certainty. "There's a helicopter spinning up on the pad. You'll be at that compound in 8 minutes. Commander Brooks will not be pleased with this decision." Chun met her eyes directly. With respect, ma'am, this isn't about Commander Brooks. This is about 6 Americans who need someone who can make shots that matter. Morrison nodded once. Exactly right, Captain. Now move. Morrison strode into the armory, where Chun worked through her pre-combat checks with methodical speed. The custom rifle lay across a bench while Chun verified the optic mounting, tested the trigger pull, and examined the barrel for any damage from its time in storage. A specialist arrived with a green ammunition can containing Chen's custom match loads, setting it beside her with careful reverence. Chen opened the can and inspected the rounds, brass cases gleaming under the fluorescent lights. Each cartridge had been hand-loaded to exact specifications. Powder charges measured to the 10th of a grain, bullets seated to precise depths. She loaded 5 rounds into a magazine and locked it into the rifle, then cycled the action to chamber the first cartridge. Morrison watched the efficiency of movement, recognizing the patterns of someone who'd performed these actions thousands of times. How long since you last fired this rifle? 3 weeks, ma'am. Chen closed the bolt and engaged the safety. My last range session before this deployment. I was shooting consistent half-minute groups at 1,000 meters in 12-mile-per-hour wind. And you're confident you can make these shots cold, under combat stress, with lives depending on it? Chen met her eyes without hesitation. Yes, ma'am. This is what I do. Morrison's radio crackled with Brooks's voice, demanding to know why he wasn't being consulted on tactical changes. She ignored it and gestured toward the door. Your helicopter is waiting. You'll have a spotter assigned once you're on site. Mission parameters are simple. 4 hostile positions, 870 to 940 meters. Neutralize the threats and get those contractors out safely. Chun secured her rifle and grabbed the ammunition can. Understood, ma'am. She moved toward the door, then paused. Thank you for retrieving my rifle. Thank those contractors if they're still alive when this is over. Morrison's expression hardened. And Captain, I'm ending Commander Brooks's authority over this operation effective immediately. You report directly to me until this mission concludes. The helicopter rotors beat the air into submission as Chun climbed aboard, the crew chief helping secure her equipment. The pilot didn't wait for clearance beyond Morrison's direct order, pulling pitch and lifting off while Chun strapped into the jump seat. Through the open door, she watched the base fall away, replaced by the dark landscape of Afghanistan, illuminated only by scattered lights from compounds and villages. The crew chief handed her a headset, and she plugged into the intercom. Flight time 7 minutes, he said over the rotor noise. LZ is 400 meters from the objective. Ground commander is expecting you, but he's not happy about it. Chun adjusted her gear and checked her rifle again, a final verification before entering combat. The crew chief watched her handle the weapon with obvious expertise, noting the custom components and precision assembly. That's some serious hardware, ma'am. Looks expensive. 3 years of development and about $15,000 in components. Chun seated her magazine firmly and verified the chamber. But it is exactly what I needed to do. The helicopter flared over the landing zone, touching down in a cloud of dust that swirled through the cabin. Chun exited quickly with her gear, moving to cover as the aircraft lifted off and banked away. The sound of gunfire echoed across the valley, muzzle flashes visible on the ridgelines where hostile fighters maintained their positions. Webb appeared from behind a rocky outcropping, his expression showing relief mixed with concern. Captain Chun, glad you're here, but Brooks is going to lose his mind when he finds out. Colonel Morrison pulled rank and gave me direct orders. Chun followed him toward the defensive perimeter. What's the current situation? 6 contractors still barricaded in the main building, taking sustained fire. We've got 2 sniper teams engaging, but they can't reach the hostile positions effectively. Standard rifles and ammunition just don't have the legs at these ranges. Webb led her to an elevated position with good sight lines toward the ridges. Mitchell and Ramirez have been shooting for 20 minutes with minimal effect. Chun dropped her pack and began setting up her rifle on a rocky ledge that provided stable support. She ranged the first hostile position through her scope, reading the distance as 892 meters. Wind flags near the compound showed right-to-left movement, approximately 12 miles per hour based on the angle and flutter pattern. She pulled out her data book and consulted her ballistic charts, custom-built tables showing her rifle's trajectory and wind drift at various distances with her specific ammunition. At 892 meters with 12-mile-per-hour crosswind, she needed 3.7 mils of elevation and 1.2 mils of wind hold. Chen dialed the adjustments into her scope and settled into her shooting position. Brooks's voice erupted over Webb's radio, demanding to know why there was an unauthorized sniper on his tactical net. Webb looked at Chun, who ignored the transmission entirely and focused on her target. A hostile fighter moved between cover positions on the ridgeline, briefly exposing himself as he repositioned to maintain fire on the compound. Chen's breathing slowed to the controlled rhythm she'd practiced 10,000 times. Her finger took up slack on the trigger, pressure building smoothly until the rifle fired with a sharp crack that echoed across the valley. She stayed in the scope through the recoil, watching the bullet's flight. The hostile fighter dropped instantly, the round impacting center mass exactly where Chun had aimed. The other fighters on the ridgeline immediately ceased fire and took cover, their invulnerability shattered by a shot that had reached them when others couldn't. Brooks stood 50 meters away, watching through his binoculars, his expression frozen between shock and anger. Morrison's voice came through his radio with precise clarity. "Commander Brooks, Captain Chun is now primary sniper on this operation under my direct authority. Your sniper teams will shift to supporting roles. You will not interfere with her engagement of hostile targets. Acknowledge." Brooks keyed his radio after a long pause. Acknowledged. Chun ranged the second hostile position at 917 meters, a fighter partially concealed behind a cluster of rocks with only his head and shoulders visible. The wind had shifted slightly, now gusting to 15 miles per hour in irregular patterns. She compensated for the increased drift and the smaller target profile, adjusting her hold to account for the partial cover. Webb lay beside her with a spotting scope, calling corrections based on environmental changes. Wind picked up. 15 sustained, gust to 18. Mirage indicates temperature gradient. Chun made micro-adjustments to her hold, accounting for the additional wind drift and the vertical displacement caused by the temperature differential. The hostile fighter shifted position slightly, giving her a clearer view of his torso. She controlled her breathing, let the crosshairs settle, and pressed the trigger. The second fighter fell away from his position, the custom bullet carrying enough energy at 917 meters to defeat the partial cover and deliver lethal force. The remaining two hostile positions went completely silent, fighters hugging the ground and abandoning their attack on the compound. Mitchell watched through his own scope from his position, seeing what Chen's rifle accomplished in minutes after his team had fired dozens of rounds without effect. The difference wasn't just skill, though that was clearly present. The difference was equipment purpose-built for exactly this scenario, ammunition that delivered consistent performance where standard loads failed, and a shooter who understood the complete system from physics to application. Brooks approached Chen's position, his face showing the careful control of someone managing rage through professional discipline. "Captain Chun, your presence here is noted. However, this doesn't change the fact that your equipment wasn't properly vetted through channels." Chun kept her eye on the scope, tracking the third hostile position. "With respect, sir, proper vetting is a peacetime luxury. Right now, those contractors need someone who can make these shots, and my rifle is the only weapon system here capable of doing that reliably." Brooks opened his mouth to respond, but Morrison's voice cut through his radio again. "Commander Brooks, I need you focused on coordinating the extraction of those contractors, not debating equipment protocols. Captain Chun has operational priority until all hostile positions are neutralized. Clear?" Brooks's jaw worked silently for a moment before he keyed his radio. "Clear, ma'am." He walked away toward his command position, his back rigid with suppressed fury. Chun ranged the third position at 943 meters, the longest shot of the engagement. The fighter had moved deeper into cover, presenting only intermittent targets as he shifted position. She settled into her rifle and waited for the opening she needed, her mind calculating holds and leads while her body remained perfectly still. Above the valley, the first hints of dawn touched the eastern sky, painting the ridgelines in shades of gray and amber. Chun maintained her position behind a rifle, scope focused on the third hostile position at 943 meters. The fighter moved cautiously between rock formations, aware that his companions had been neutralized, but not yet willing to abandon his attack. She tracked his movements, reading the pattern of his repositioning and predicting where he would expose himself next. Webb adjusted beside her, watching through the spotting scope. Winds holding steady at 14 miles per hour. Temperature rising with the sun. That's going to affect your elevation slightly as the air density changes. Chin nodded without speaking, her attention locked on the target area. The fighter emerged from behind a boulder, bringing his rifle up to engage the compound again. She had 2 seconds before he disappeared back into cover. Her crosshairs settled on his center mass, holdover adjusted for the distance and environmental factors that would affect the bullet during its 2-second flight. The rifle cracked and recoiled against her shoulder. Through the scope, she watched the bullet arc across the valley and impact precisely where she'd aimed, the fighter collapsing behind the rocks. 3 targets neutralized at ranges that had been impossible for the standard equipment. The mathematical certainty of ballistics expressed through custom-built precision. Brooks stood at his command position, watching through binoculars, his expression unreadable. Mitchell approached from the sniper position, his rifle slung across his chest. "Sir, Captain Chin just made 3 confirmed kills at ranges where our equipment couldn't connect. That custom rifle is performing exactly as she claimed it would." Brooks lowered his binoculars slowly. "Her rifle hasn't been through the proper vetting process. We got lucky that it performed under field conditions, but that doesn't validate the equipment for standard use." Mitchell's professional mask slipped for just a moment. "Sir, with respect, luck had nothing to do with it. That's precision shooting at the highest level with equipment purpose-built for extended range. We've been trying to make those shots for 20 minutes with 0 results." Brooks turned to face him directly. "Sergeant, I understand you're impressed by the performance, but equipment decisions are made at command level for good reasons. We can't have every specialist bringing their personal modifications into combat operations without proper authorization." Mitchell held his gaze for 3 seconds before responding. "Understood, sir." He walked back toward his position, leaving Brooks alone with his binoculars and his certainty that procedure mattered more than results. Chun ranged the 4th and final hostile position at 967 meters, the longest shot of the engagement. The fighter had watched his companions fall and was attempting to withdraw, moving quickly between cover positions as he retreated up the ridgeline. She tracked his movement, calculating leads and holds for a target moving at angle to her position. Target 4 is mobile, Webb called, moving upslope at approximately 45 degrees to your line. Speed about 2 meters per second. Chun adjusted her aim point ahead of the fighter's movement, accounting for the time the bullet would take to reach that distance. The custom ammunition maintained supersonic velocity past 1,000 meters, giving her a flat enough trajectory that her lead calculation remained manageable. The fighter emerged from behind a rock formation, running toward the next covered position 15 meters away. She led him by 3 feet, pressed the trigger, and watched the bullet intercept his path. The fighter went down in mid-stride, the 4th hostile neutralized in under 6 minutes of engagement. The ridgeline fell silent, all immediate threats eliminated. Webb keyed his radio. "Command, this is Overwatch. All 4 hostile positions neutralized. Compound is clear for QRF approach." Brooks acknowledged the transmission and ordered his teams forward. The quick reaction force moved toward the compound in tactical formation, weapons ready for any remaining threats. Chun maintained her Overwatch position, scanning the ridgelines through her scope for additional targets while the extraction team reached the main building. The contractors emerged from the fortified structure looking shaken but uninjured. 6 American civilians who'd spent 30 minutes under sustained fire with nowhere to go. Brooks met them at the door, conducting a rapid assessment of their condition while his medic checked for wounds. All 6 were physically intact, their defensive position having held just long enough for Chen's intervention to eliminate the threats. Morrison's voice came through the tactical net with professional satisfaction. Well done, all elements. QRF. Begin extraction procedures. Captain Chun. Maintain overwatch until all personnel are loaded and moving. Chun acknowledged and continued scanning, her rifle tracking across potential threat positions with mechanical precision. Webb pulled out his rangefinder and measured the distances to the 4 positions where bodies lay among the rocks. 892, 917, 943, and 967 meters. For shots, for kills, in conditions where standard equipment had been completely ineffective. He photographed the data with his phone, documenting the ranges and environmental factors. The evidence was absolute and irrefutable. Chen's custom rifle had accomplished what Brooks's entire sniper section couldn't, saving 6 American lives in the process. The extraction convoy formed up with the contractors loaded into armored vehicles, Brooks directing the movement from his command truck. Chun broke down her position and moved toward the landing zone where the helicopter waited to return her to base. Mitchell approached as she packed her rifle into its case, his expression showing professional respect. That was exceptional shooting, Captain. I've been a sniper for 8 years, and I've never seen anyone make those shots look that easy. Chun secured the case latches. They weren't easy. I just had the right equipment for the job and enough practice to use it effectively. Mitchell glanced toward Brooks, who was supervising the convoy departure. He's not going to acknowledge what happened here. You know that, right? He'll find some way to spin this as a training issue or a procedural exception rather than admitting his equipment decisions were wrong. Chun shouldered her pack. I'm not here for acknowledgement, Sergeant. I'm here to do my job and keep people alive. Everything else is just noise. The helicopter lifted off with Chun aboard, carrying her back toward the base while the convoy rolled out on the ground route. She sat in the jump seat with her rifle case secure beside her, watching the compound recede into the distance. 6 contractors alive, because Morrison had overridden Brooks's authority and retrieved the one weapon system capable of reaching the threats that mattered. Brooks rode in the lead vehicle, his jaw tight and his thoughts racing through justifications. The mission had succeeded, which was what mattered from a command perspective. But the success had come through equipment he'd specifically rejected and a subordinate he'd dismissed as procedurally noncompliant. The cognitive dissonance created pressure that demanded resolution, and Brooks's mind automatically sought explanations that preserved his sense of professional competence. The custom rifle had performed well under field conditions, but that didn't change the fact that it hadn't been properly vetted. Chin had made difficult shots, but that could be attributed to luck or favorable conditions rather than superior equipment. His sniper teams had struggled with the ranges, but that was a training issue that could be addressed through better preparation. The narrative assembled itself piece by piece, transforming his mistakes into reasonable decisions made with incomplete information. By the time the convoy reached the base, Brooks had convinced himself that the morning's events validated his general approach, even if some specific tactical adjustments were warranted. Chen's performance was noteworthy, but didn't justify abandoning established equipment protocols. Morrison had overstepped her authority by intervening in his tactical planning, though he'd addressed that through proper channels rather than direct confrontation. Morrison waited in the command center when both the convoy and helicopter returned, her attention focused on the after-action reports flowing in from multiple sources. She reviewed the drone footage showing Chen's 4 consecutive kills at ranges where Brooks's teams had fired dozens of ineffective rounds. The tactical timeline documented Brooks's refusal to call for Chun despite clear equipment failure, his resistance to Morrison's intervention, and his obvious anger at being overridden. She pulled Chen's confiscation records, noting that Brooks had locked away the rifle 3 days after her arrival with minimal justification. The pattern suggested personal bias rather than legitimate procedural concerns, a command failure that had nearly cost American lives. Morrison made notes in her private log, documentation that would inform the conversation she intended to have with Brooks within the hour. Chen entered the command center and rendered a salute. Ma'am, mission complete. All 4 hostile positions neutralized. No friendly casualties. Contractors extracted safely. Morrison returned the salute. Excellent work, Captain. Your shooting was exactly what this situation required. She gestured toward a chair. Sit down. We need to discuss what happens next, because Commander Brooks is not going to let this go quietly. Morrison closed the command center door and gestured for Chun to sit at the conference table. The colonel pulled up the drone footage on the main display, showing the tactical engagement from aerial perspective. 4 hostile positions marked on the ridgelines. Timestamps showing Chin's rapid elimination of each threat while Brooks's sniper teams had fired without effect. I want your assessment of what happened this morning, Morrison said. Not the tactical summary, but your professional evaluation of the equipment and command decisions involved. Chin organized her thoughts before responding. Ma'am, the tactical scenario required precision engagement at ranges between 870 and 967 meters under field conditions with wind and elevation variables. Standard M110 rifles with ball ammunition are rated effective to 800 meters, but that's under optimal conditions. In the field, environmental factors degrade performance significantly past 700 meters. Morrison nodded. And your custom rifle was designed specifically for these extended ranges. Yes, ma'am. The custom barrel provides superior harmonic stability, reducing vertical dispersion. The match-grade ammunition I hand-load delivers consistent velocity and ballistic coefficient, minimizing wind drift and drop variations. The precision optic allows exact compensation for environmental factors. The complete system is engineered to maintain half-minute accuracy at ranges where standard equipment delivers 3 to 4-minute groups. So when Commander Brooks confiscated your rifle and assigned you to supply duty, he removed the one asset capable of reliably engaging at those distances. Chin chose her words carefully. The commander believed standard equipment was adequate for any mission we'd encounter, ma'am. This morning's engagement demonstrated that assessment was incorrect. Morrison pulled up the communications log showing Webb's request for Chun and Brooks's denial. Your rifle was available. You were available, and the tactical situation clearly required your capability. Commander Brooks refused to deploy you even as his teams failed repeatedly to neutralize the threats. 6 American contractors continued taking fire for 12 additional minutes because he wouldn't authorize your employment. Chin remained silent, recognizing the statement didn't require response. Morrison studied the timeline with the focused attention of someone building a case from documented evidence. The colonel switched displays to Chin's service record. 3 silver stars for marksmanship. 37 confirmed kills over 2 deployments. Specialized training at multiple advanced schools. You're not some amateur who showed up with garage build equipment, Captain. You're a subject matter expert who developed custom tools to enhance your professional capability. Brooks characterized my rifle as hobby shop nonsense, ma'am. He expressed concerns about equipment that hadn't been properly vetted through procurement channels. Morrison's expression hardened. His concerns nearly got 6 people killed. She pulled up another file showing Brooks's equipment decisions over his command tenure. This isn't the first time he's rejected specialized equipment or dismissed expert recommendations. I have 3 documented cases where specialists requested approval for mission-specific tools and were denied based on procedural objections. Chun absorbed this information without comment, understanding she was seeing a pattern that extended beyond her own experience. Morrison continued pulling files, building a comprehensive picture of Brooks's command philosophy and its consequences. 2 female specialists transferred out of this unit in the past 18 months, both citing hostile command climate. Morrison looked directly at Chun. Did Commander Brooks make any comments about female soldiers or their capabilities when you first reported? Chun met her eyes steadily. He mentioned that 3 female specialists had rotated through the unit in 2 years and requested transfers because they couldn't handle the standards maintained here, ma'am. And did you observe anything during your time here that suggested those standards were unreasonably high or applied unequally? I observed that Commander Brooks dismissed expertise that contradicted his established procedures regardless of whether that expertise could enhance unit capability. I observed that he characterized specialized equipment as non-compliant rather than evaluating its operational value. And I observed that his tactical planning relied on capabilities his unit didn't actually possess. Morrison made notes on her tablet. Within the hour, I'm meeting with Commander Brooks to discuss this morning's operation and his command decisions. I want you present for that meeting. You'll provide technical testimony about the equipment and tactical requirements involved. Brooks arrived at the command center 15 minutes later, his uniform showing dust from the field operation. He entered expecting a mission debrief and found Morrison seated at the head of the conference table with Chun and a staff officer handling documentation. His posture shifted immediately to something defensive. "Commander Brooks, please sit down." Morrison's tone carried formal authority rather than collegial cooperation. "We're conducting an after-action review of this morning's engagement, focusing on command decisions and their impact on mission execution." Brooks took a seat across from Chun, his expression carefully neutral. "Ma'am, the mission succeeded. All contractors were extracted safely with 0 friendly casualties. I'd characterize this as a successful operation." Morrison pulled up the tactical timeline. "The mission succeeded after I personally intervened to override your command decisions and deploy the one asset capable of engaging the threats effectively. Let's review the sequence of events." She advanced through the timeline, highlighting key moments. 0430, alert received. 0443, your sniper teams engage hostile positions at ranges from 870 to 940 meters. 0515, your teams have fired approximately 40 rounds with 0 confirmed hits. 0518, Sergeant Webb requests Captain Chun and her custom rifle. You deny the request. 0519, I observe the tactical situation and intervene. 0532, Captain Chun arrives on site and neutralizes the first hostile position at 892 meters on her first shot. Brooks leaned forward. "Ma'am, my teams were working to adjust their fire and compensate for the extended ranges. Captain Chin's equipment hadn't been properly vetted, and I couldn't authorize improving gear in an active combat situation." Morrison pulled up Chin's service record. "Captain Chun is not unproven, Commander. She's an expert marksman with 3 silver stars and 37 confirmed kills. Her custom rifle had been used successfully in 17 previous combat missions." She paused and pulled up the next document. "You confiscated that rifle 3 days after her arrival, citing equipment compliance concerns. But military regulations specifically authorize specialized equipment when the operator has documented expertise and the equipment serves a legitimate operational purpose." Brooks's jaw tightened. "Ma'am, we have procurement procedures for good reasons. I can't have every specialist bringing their personal equipment into combat operations without proper oversight. This wasn't personal equipment, Commander. This was mission-critical capability that you removed from service based on procedural objections rather than operational assessment." Morrison advanced to the next screen, showing the drone footage. "Your decision cost 12 minutes, during which 6 Americans remained under fire from positions your standard equipment couldn't reach. If I hadn't intervened, what was your plan for neutralizing those threats?" Brooks hesitated, his response delayed by the need to construct justification in real time. "My teams would have adjusted their fire and eventually neutralized the positions, or we would have maneuvered ground forces to flank the hostile positions." Morrison shook her head. "The drone footage shows the hostile positions were inaccessible to ground forces without crossing open terrain under fire. Your sniper teams fired 40-plus rounds without effect. Captain Chin fired 4 rounds and eliminated all 4 threats in under 6 minutes." She leaned back in her chair. "Commander, this isn't about procedure compliance. This is about you dismissing expert capability because it contradicted your established approach." Brooks's professional control began showing cracks. "Ma'am, I make command decisions based on unit readiness and operational requirements. Captain Chin showed up with custom equipment that hadn't been evaluated by this command. I acted appropriately to maintain standards." "You acted to maintain your authority," Morrison said quietly. "And in doing so, You created a situation where American lives depended on equipment you knew was inadequate for the mission requirements. She pulled up the final document. This is my preliminary finding for the investigation. I'm initiating into your command decisions. You're suspended from tactical command effective immediately, pending formal review. Brooks sat rigid in his chair, the formal suspension landing like physical impact. Ma'am, I respectfully request that you reconsider this action. My command decisions were made in good faith based on operational security and equipment protocols. Morrison closed her tablet with deliberate finality. Your good faith doesn't change the outcome, Commander. 6 Americans nearly died because you prioritized your ego over their safety. She stood, and the staff officer gathered documentation. You're relieved of tactical command. Major Reeves will assume your duties while the investigation proceeds. You'll confine yourself to administrative functions and make yourself available for formal questioning. Brooks pushed back from the table, his face flushed with suppressed anger. I've served this military for 15 years without incident. One disputed tactical decision doesn't warrant this level of response. One disputed decision that's part of a documented pattern. Morrison's voice remained level, but carried absolute authority. You've rejected specialized equipment 3 times in 18 months. You've driven out 2 female specialists through hostile command climate. And this morning you refused to deploy a qualified expert, even as your own teams failed repeatedly to complete the mission. That's not one decision, Commander. That's systemic failure. Brooks looked at Chun, his expression mixing accusation with disbelief. You came here with your custom rifle and your impressive record, and within 3 days you've gotten me relieved of command. Congratulations, Captain. Chun met his eyes without flinching. I came here to do my job, sir. You confiscated the equipment I needed to do it, then assigned me to inventory duty. This morning, 6 contractors needed someone who could make shots at extended range, and Colonel Morrison gave me the opportunity to serve. I didn't relieve you of command. Your decisions did. Brooks turned back to Morrison. I want to file a formal protest of this suspension. My actions were consistent with established unit procedures and command authority. You're entitled to file any protest you wish. Morrison moved toward the door, but the suspension stands pending investigation. You're dismissed, Commander. Brooks left the command center, his movements stiff with barely controlled rage. Chun remained seated while Morrison reviewed additional documentation, the colonel's attention already shifting to next steps and longer-term consequences. Captain Chun, you'll provide detailed written testimony about your interactions with Commander Brooks, including the confiscation of your rifle and your attempts to offer tactical expertise. Morrison pulled up a template form on her screen. I also need technical documentation on your custom rifle, including development history, testing data, and combat performance records. I have all that information in my personal files, ma'am. Chun stood and moved toward the door. I can have the complete package ready within 4 hours. Make it 2 hours. This investigation moves quickly because we can't afford command uncertainty while we're in active operations. Morrison looked up from her screen. And Captain, I'm formally returning your custom rifle to your possession with authorization for combat use. You're also being assigned to the sniper rotation effective immediately. Thank you, ma'am. Morrison's expression softened slightly. You don't need to thank me for letting you do your job, Captain. That should have been standard from day one. Now get me that documentation so we can finish this properly. Chun left the command center and walked across the compound toward the barracks, passing groups of soldiers who'd heard about the morning's engagement through the informal communication network that operated faster than official channels. Webb intercepted her near the armory, his expression showing satisfaction mixed with concern. Word is Brooks got suspended. Webb fell in a step beside her. Half the base knows about it already, and the other half will know by dinner. Colonel Morrison is conducting a formal investigation. Chun kept her voice neutral. I'm providing testimony about command decisions and equipment issues. Brooks is going to fight this. Webb glanced around to ensure they weren't overheard. He's got friends in higher command, people who think the same way he does about procedure and authority. This could get complicated. Chun stopped walking and faced him directly. Sergeant, 6 contractors are alive today, because Colonel Morrison overrode Brooks's authority and retrieved my rifle. The tactical evidence is absolute. Brooks's teams fired 40 rounds without neutralizing a single threat. I fired 4 rounds and eliminated all 4 positions. That's not opinion or interpretation. That's documented fact. Webb nodded slowly. You're right. The evidence is clear, but you need to understand how the system works. Brooks will argue procedure and authorization. He'll claim you got lucky or that his teams would have eventually succeeded. He'll find senior officers who believe command authority matters more than tactical results. Then those officers will have to explain why they value procedure over American lives. Chen resumed, walking toward the barracks. I'm not interested in politics, Sergeant. I'm interested in doing my job with the tools I need to do it effectively. Mitchell waited outside the barracks, cleaning his rifle with methodical attention. He looked up as Chen approached. Captain, I wanted to say something about this morning. Watching you make those shots showed me what's possible with the right equipment and training. I've been a sniper for 8 years, and I learned more in 6 minutes than I did in my last qualification cycle. Chen sat down on the bench beside him. What did you learn, Sergeant? That standard equipment has limitations I'd been trained to accept as normal. Mitchell set down his cleaning rod. We're taught that 800 meters is our effective range, and anything past that is luck or extraordinary circumstances. But you demonstrated that with proper equipment and load development, those ranges become reliable and repeatable. Chen pulled out her data book and opened it to her ballistic charts. These tables represent 3 years of testing and refinement. Every data point is based on actual shooting under various conditions. The difference between standard equipment and custom equipment isn't just quality. It's understanding the complete system and optimizing every component to work together. Mitchell studied the charts with focused attention, his finger tracing the wind drift and elevation values. This is sophisticated data collection. You're treating long-range shooting like engineering rather than just marksmanship, because it is engineering. Chen flipped to another page showing barrel harmonics data. The bullet exits the barrel while the metal is still vibrating from the firing impulse. Standard barrels have vibration patterns that cause vertical dispersion. My custom barrel is tuned to minimize those harmonics, reducing group size at extended range by 40%. Can this approach be taught? Mitchell looked up from the charts. Could you train other shooters to develop their own optimized systems? Given time and resources, yes. Chen closed the data book, but it requires command support and authorization to use specialized equipment. Brooks opposed that approach. Morrison seems more open to it. The word about Brooks's suspension has people talking. Mitchell returned to cleaning his rifle. Some think Morrison overstepped her authority. Others think Brooks got what he deserved for being stubborn. Most just want to know if the command climate is going to change. Chen considered her response carefully. What happened this morning wasn't about personalities or command politics. It was about having the right capability available when it mattered. If the investigation leads to changes in how we approach equipment and expertise, that benefits everyone. Mitchell reassembled his rifle and stood. For what it's worth, Captain, you've got support from the sniper section. We saw what happened today, and we know who made the difference. He slung his rifle and headed toward the range, leaving Chen alone with her thoughts. She entered the barracks and retrieved her laptop, beginning the process of compiling documentation for Morrison's investigation. The technical specifications came first, detailed descriptions of every custom component and its purpose. Then the testing data, hundreds of groups fired at various ranges under different conditions. Finally, the combat records, 17 missions where the custom rifle had enabled engagements that standard equipment couldn't accomplish. The documentation took 90 minutes to compile into a comprehensive package. Chen reviewed it twice for accuracy and completeness, then encrypted the file and sent it to Morrison's secure email. The evidence was thorough and irrefutable, a technical case built from ballistic reality rather than opinion or preference. She closed the laptop and lay back on her bunk, processing the day's events with the same methodical analysis she applied to shooting problems. Brooks had created a command environment where expertise was threatening rather than valuable, where procedure mattered more than results. Morrison had recognized that failure and acted decisively to correct it. The investigation would determine whether Brooks's approach was individual pathology or symptomatic of broader institutional problems. Chen's phone buzzed with a message from Morrison. Documentation received. Well organized and thorough. Be prepared to testify formally tomorrow at 0900. The investigation was moving forward with the speed and certainty of a bullet in flight, trajectory calculated and impact inevitable. Morrison spent the evening reviewing documentation that painted a comprehensive picture of Brooks's command tenure. The first file contained personnel records showing the two female specialists who transferred out, both citing unspecified command climate issues in their departure statements. She cross-referenced their transfer dates with Brooks's equipment denial decisions and found temporal overlap, each specialist having submitted requests for mission-specific tools that were rejected within weeks of their transfers. The second file held training records showing the unit's long-range capability had declined measurably over Brooks's 18-month command. Average qualification distances had dropped from 720 meters to 640 meters, a decline Brooks had attributed to challenging environmental conditions in his reports. Morrison pulled weather data for the same period and found no significant changes in wind patterns or temperature ranges that would explain the degradation. She moved to the third file containing equipment requests from 3 different specialists over the past year. A demolitions expert had requested custom breach charges with specific explosive compositions for hardened targets. Brooks denied it, citing procurement protocols. A communications specialist had requested encryption hardware that exceeded standard issue specifications. Brooks denied it, citing security review requirements. A reconnaissance specialist had requested thermal imaging equipment with enhanced range. Brooks denied it, citing budget constraints. Morrison made notes in her investigation log, documenting the pattern with timestamps and regulation citations. Each denial had superficial procedural justification, but the cumulative effect was systematic rejection of specialized expertise and capability enhancement. The pattern suggested Brooks viewed specialist knowledge as threatening to his command authority rather than as assets to be leveraged. Her phone rang with a call from Major General Pierce at Regional Command, Brooks's immediate superior in the chain of authority. Morrison answered professionally, expecting the conversation she'd been anticipating since suspending Brooks. Patricia, I received notification that you suspended Commander Brooks pending investigation. Pierce's voice carried the careful neutrality of someone gathering information before forming opinions. Walk me through your reasoning. Morrison pulled up the tactical timeline on her screen. Sir, this morning we had 6 American contractors under fire at a civilian compound. Hostile positions at ranges from 870 to 967 meters. Commander Brooks deployed his sniper teams with standard equipment that proved unable to engage effectively at those distances. When his teams failed after 20 minutes of sustained fire, his tactical sergeant requested a specialized sniper with custom equipment. Brooks denied the request. I intervened, deployed the specialist, and all 4 hostile positions were neutralized in under 6 minutes with 0 friendly casualties. Pierce was silent for several seconds. And the specialist was Captain Sarah Chun, who Brooks had previously reassigned to supply duty after confiscating her custom rifle. Correct, sir. Chun is an expert marksman with 3 silver stars and 37 confirmed kills. Her custom rifle had been used successfully in 17 previous combat missions. Brooks confiscated it 3 days after her arrival, citing equipment compliance concerns that were not supported by military regulations. I'm seeing the after-action report now. Pierce's tone shifted slightly as he reviewed the documentation. 4 shots for kills at those ranges. That's impressive shooting with any equipment. The tactical evidence is conclusive, sir. Brooks's standard equipment and his rejection of specialized capability created a situation where American lives were at risk. When presented with a solution, he refused to authorize it based on procedural objections rather than operational assessment. Pierce exhaled slowly. Patricia, you understand that relieving a commander mid-deployment is serious business. Brooks has 15 years of service and a generally solid record. One tactical disagreement, even a significant one, might not warrant suspension. Morrison anticipated this response and pulled up her compiled evidence. Sir, this isn't one incident. I've documented a pattern over 18 months. Brooks has rejected specialized equipment requests from 3 different experts. 2 female specialists transferred out, citing hostile command climate. The unit's long-range capability has declined 40% under his command. This morning's engagement was the culmination of systematic failures, not an isolated event. She heard Pierce typing, presumably reviewing the files she'd submitted with her initial report. The general's background included combat arms experience and tactical command, giving him the expertise to evaluate her evidence critically. The pattern you're describing suggests Brooks has institutional biases that affect his command decisions. Pierce spoke carefully, aware the conversation was likely being recorded. But we need to distinguish between poor judgment and conduct that warrants relief. Has Brooks violated any specific regulations or orders? He violated the spirit of mission accomplishment by prioritizing procedure over capability when lives were at stake. Morrison kept her voice level. Military regulations explicitly authorize specialized equipment when operators have documented expertise. Brooks ignored those regulations because Chen's capability contradicted his established approach. 6 contractors nearly died as a result. Pierce remained silent for a long moment. I'm authorizing your investigation to continue. Keep Brooks suspended from tactical command, but don't confine him to quarters or restrict his movement beyond that. I want a full report within 72 hours, including testimony from all relevant personnel. And Patricia, make sure this investigation is thorough and documented properly. If we're going to relieve a commander, the evidence needs to be absolutely solid. Understood, sir. The evidence will be comprehensive. Morrison ended the call and returned to her documentation, knowing Pierce's caution was both professionally appropriate and potentially problematic. Brooks would use the 72-hour window to build his defense and rally support from officers who shared his procedural mindset. The investigation needed to move quickly and establish facts before competing narratives could take hold. She drafted testimony schedules for the next day, starting with the 6 contractors who'd been under fire. Their perspective would provide civilian validation of the tactical situation independent of military command dynamics. Then Webb and Mitchell from the sniper section, whose professional expertise would establish the equipment limitations and Brooks's pattern of rejection. Finally, Chun herself, whose technical knowledge and documented performance would anchor the case in ballistic reality. The morning testimony began at 0900 with the 6 contractors assembled in the command center conference room. Morrison recorded their statements individually, building a timeline of the attack and their experience during the engagement. The first contractor, a civil engineer named Peterson, described the terror of sustained fire against their defensive position with no ability to return effective fire or withdraw safely. We were trapped in that building for 30 minutes with rounds coming through the windows and door frames. Peterson's hands shook slightly as he recalled the experience. We could hear the American sniper team shooting, but nothing changed. The enemy kept firing, kept moving around up on those ridges like they knew they were out of reach. When did the situation change? Morrison asked, her tone professionally neutral. When Captain Chen arrived. Peterson looked directly at Morrison. We heard 4 shots over maybe 5 minutes, and suddenly everything went quiet. No more incoming fire. Whatever she did, it worked when nothing else had. Morrison interviewed all 6 contractors with similar results. Each described the same sequence. Prolonged fire from elevated positions, American sniper teams engaging without effect, Chen's arrival, and rapid neutralization of all threats. Their testimony established clear civilian corroboration of the tactical failure and Chen's decisive intervention. Webb testified next, providing professional military perspective on the equipment limitations. He described watching Mitchell's team fire dozens of rounds at 870 meters with consistent undershoots, the standard ammunition simply lacking the ballistic performance for reliable hits at those ranges and field conditions. I requested Captain Chun and her custom rifle because I recognized our standard equipment wasn't solving the problem. Webb spoke with precise military professionalism. Commander Brooks denied my request, stating the equipment wasn't properly vetted. I understood his procedural concern, but the tactical situation required capability we didn't have with standard gear. What was your assessment of Commander Brooks's decision? Morrison asked. Webb chose his words carefully. The commander prioritized equipment authorization over mission accomplishment. That decision extended the time contractors remained under fire by approximately 12 minutes. Mitchell's testimony reinforced Webb's account and added technical detail about the specific challenges of extended-range shooting with standard equipment. He described the ballistic limitations, the environmental factors that degraded accuracy, and his professional assessment that Chen's custom rifle represented a significant capability enhancement rather than just marginal improvement. Captain Chun made 4 shots that none of us could have made with our equipment. Mitchell's tone carried professional respect rather than defensiveness. That's not a criticism of our training or skill. That's recognition that specialized tools enable performance that standard equipment can't achieve. Morrison compiled the testimony into her investigation file, the evidence building a comprehensive case that transcended command disagreement or personality conflict. The contractors validated the tactical emergency. Webb and Mitchell validated the equipment limitations and Brooks's refusal to adapt. Chen's technical documentation validated the capability difference. The timeline validated Morrison's intervention as necessary to prevent further casualties. She drafted her preliminary findings for General Pierce, outlining Brooks's pattern of rejecting specialized capability, his specific failures during the contractor engagement, and her recommendation for permanent relief from tactical command. The document took 2 hours to complete, every statement supported by documented evidence and testimony from multiple sources. Chen appeared for her formal testimony at 1400 hours, bringing additional technical documentation Morrison had requested. The captain laid out ballistic charts, testing data, and combat performance records with the same methodical precision she applied to long-range shooting. Commander Brooks characterized your rifle as hobby shop nonsense. Morrison reviewed Chen's documentation, but this data shows 3 years of systematic development and testing. Explain the difference between your equipment and standard issue. Chen walked through the technical specifications with professional clarity, describing barrel harmonics, ammunition consistency, and optical precision. She explained how each component was optimized to reduce variables that affected accuracy at extended range, creating a complete system that performed reliably where standard equipment became marginal. This isn't recreational modification, ma'am. Chen's voice carried absolute certainty. This is professional tool development by a subject matter expert to enhance combat capability. The morning engagement demonstrated exactly why this approach matters. Morrison summoned Brooks to the command center at 0800 hours on the 3rd day of the investigation. He arrived in pressed uniform with documentation folder under his arm, prepared to defend his command decisions with the same certainty he'd maintained throughout his career. Major Reeves sat as witness along with a staff officer recording the formal proceedings. Commander Brooks, I've completed the preliminary investigation into your command decisions regarding the contractor compound engagement. Morrison opened her tablet, displaying the compiled evidence. I'm presenting my findings to you now before submitting the final report to General Pierce. Brooks sat rigidly in his chair. Ma'am, I'm prepared to address any concerns about my tactical planning. The mission succeeded with 0 friendly casualties, which validates the overall approach. Morrison pulled up the tactical timeline. The mission succeeded after I personally intervened to override your decisions and deploy Captain Chun. Your approach had failed for 20 minutes before my intervention. Let's review the specific findings. She advanced through screens showing contractor testimony, sniper team performance data, and equipment analysis. 6 civilians testified they were under sustained fire with no relief until Chen's arrival. Your sniper teams fired 43 rounds with 0 confirmed hits at ranges your equipment couldn't reliably reach. Sergeant Webb requested Chin's deployment, and you denied it. These are documented facts, Commander. Brooks leaned forward. Ma'am, Captain Chin's rifle hadn't been properly vetted through procurement channels. I couldn't authorize unproven equipment in an active combat situation. That's basic command responsibility. Morrison pulled up the relevant regulation on screen. Military Regulation 5-7-12, Section 4, Paragraph 3. Specialized equipment is authorized when the operator has documented expertise and the equipment serves a legitimate operational purpose. Captain Chun had 3 Silver Stars, 37 confirmed kills, and 17 previous combat missions using that exact rifle. The equipment was thoroughly proven. Your characterization of it as unvetted is factually incorrect. Brooks's jaw tightened. The regulation requires command approval for specialized equipment. I exercise my authority to deny that approval based on my assessment of operational risk. You exercise your authority to protect your ego. Morrison's voice remained professionally level, but carried unmistakable authority. Captain Chin's expertise threatened your sense of command competence, so you confiscated her equipment and assigned her to supply duty. When a tactical situation emerged that required exactly her capability, you refused to deploy her even as American lives remained at risk. That's an unfair characterization, ma'am. Brooks's control began slipping. I make dozens of command decisions daily based on unit readiness and operational requirements. I'm not going to second-guess every specialist who claims their personal equipment is superior to standard issue. Morrison pulled up the file, showing Brooks's pattern of equipment denials. This isn't about one specialist, Commander. In 18 months, you've rejected specialized equipment requests from 3 different experts. A demolitions specialist requested custom breach charges for hardened targets. You denied it. A communications specialist requested enhanced encryption hardware. You denied it. A reconnaissance specialist requested advanced thermal imaging. You denied it. The pattern shows systematic rejection of expertise that contradicts your established procedures. Brooks shifted in his chair. Those requests had legitimate procedural concerns. I can't approve every equipment modification that specialists propose without proper authorization and testing. But you didn't cite testing requirements or request additional validation. Morrison advanced to the next document. You simply denied the requests with minimal justification. 2 female specialists transferred out during this same period, both citing hostile command climate. Your personnel records show a pattern of dismissing expertise when it comes from subordinates you view as threatening to your authority. Ma'am, I've commanded successfully for 15 years. Morrison could see Brooks grasping for defensible ground. My record shows consistent performance and mission accomplishment across multiple deployments. One disputed tactical decision doesn't negate years of effective leadership. Your 15 years of experience should have made you better at recognizing when to leverage specialized capability rather than suppress it. Morrison closed the evidence file. Instead, your experience calcified into rigid adherence to procedure at the expense of mission effectiveness. This morning's engagement was the inevitable result of that approach. She pulled up her formal findings document. Based on the evidence, I'm making the following determinations. First, you failed to properly assess and employ available tactical assets during the contractor engagement. Second, you demonstrated a pattern of rejecting specialized expertise without legitimate operational justification. Third, you created a hostile command climate that drove out qualified specialists. Fourth, your decisions directly contributed to extended risk for 6 American civilians who should have been protected more effectively. Brooks stood abruptly. Ma'am, I request the opportunity to present my complete defense before you finalize those findings. I have documentation showing my decisions were consistent with established protocols and command authority. Sit down, Commander. Morrison's tone sharpened. Your opportunity to defend your decisions was during the actual engagement when you could have deployed Chun and ended the threat immediately. Instead, you prioritized your authority over mission accomplishment. That failure is documented through multiple independent sources, including civilian testimony, professional military assessment, and technical analysis. Brooks remains standing. Are you relieving me permanently from command? I'm recommending to General Pierce that you be permanently relieved from tactical command and reassigned to administrative duties at a rear echelon facility. Morrison pulled up her final report. Your technical competence remains adequate for staff functions, but your judgment regarding personnel and equipment makes you unsuitable for command positions. Brooks's face flushed. This is career-ending, ma'am. You're destroying 15 years of service over one tactical disagreement. I'm protecting future soldiers and civilians from a commander who values his ego over their lives. Morrison stood and faced him directly. 6 people nearly died yesterday because you refused to admit your limitations. How many would have to die before you considered that a problem worth addressing? Brooks opened his mouth to respond, but found no words adequate to the accusation. He stood silently for several seconds before gathering his documentation folder. When will the final report go to General Pierce? Within the hour. Morrison moved toward the door. You're confined to administrative duties pending his decision. Major Reeves will brief you on your restricted responsibilities. Brooks left the command center with mechanical precision, his career trajectory altered irreversibly by decisions made in defense of authority he no longer possessed. Major Reeves watched him go, then turned to Morrison with professional concern. He's going to fight this through every available channel. Reeves closed his notebook. He has friends in higher command who share his views on procedure and authority. Let him fight. Morrison returned to her desk. The evidence is absolute, and the testimony is corroborated through multiple independent sources. General Pierce will make the final determination, but the facts support permanent relief. She spent the next hour finalizing her report, ensuring every finding was supported by documented evidence and tied to specific regulatory requirements. The document detailed Brooks's pattern of failures, the specific tactical mistakes during the engagement, and the broader command climate issues that had driven out qualified specialists. She attached all supporting documentation, including contractor testimony, sniper team performance data, Chin's technical analysis, and a timeline showing Morrison's intervention as the decisive factor in mission success. The report went to General Pierce at 0945 with a recommendation for immediate permanent relief from tactical command. Morrison copied it to her personal files and the base legal office, establishing a complete record that would survive any attempts to suppress or minimize the findings. Chin received notification at 1000 hours that Brooks's suspension was being elevated to recommendation for permanent relief. She was in the armory conducting maintenance on her rifle when Morrison's aide delivered the message along with a request for Chun to report to the command center. Morrison waited in her office reviewing personnel files for Brooks's replacement. She looked up when Chun entered and gestured to a chair. Captain, General Pierce has received my recommendation to permanently relieve Commander Brooks from tactical command. The evidence supports that action, but Brooks will likely appeal through every channel available to him. Chin sat down. Ma'am, I didn't come here seeking this outcome. I came to serve in my assigned role with the equipment I needed to be effective. I know that. Morrison closed the personnel files. But sometimes doing your job properly exposes others who aren't doing theirs. Brooks created conditions that endangered lives through his systematic rejection of expertise. Your presence and performance made that failure visible in ways that couldn't be ignored or minimized. What happens now, ma'am? General Pierce will make the final decision within 48 hours. If he accepts my recommendation, Brooks will be permanently reassigned away from tactical command. Morrison pulled up a new document, and I'm implementing immediate policy changes regarding specialized equipment and specialist employment. The new guidance explicitly authorizes mission-specific tools when operators have documented expertise, and it establishes formal review processes for any equipment denial decisions. Chin absorbed this information. That will help future specialists who face similar situations. That's the goal. Morrison leaned back in her chair. But I want you to understand something, Captain. What happened here was institutionally significant beyond just Brooks's relief. You demonstrated that specialized capability matters, that expertise should be leveraged rather than suppressed, and that combat effectiveness requires commanders who can set aside ego in favor of mission accomplishment. Those lessons will shape how this command approaches specialist employment going forward. General Pierce's decision arrived 48 hours later through encrypted communication channels. Morrison read the message in her office at 0600, the conclusion confirming her recommendation with additional directives for implementation. Brooks was permanently relieved from tactical command effective immediately and reassigned to logistics coordination at Camp Arifjan in Kuwait, a rear echelon position with no authority over combat operations or personnel decisions. Morrison called a unit formation at 0800 to announce the command change. Soldiers assembled in the compound's central area while the morning sun climbed over the perimeter walls. She stood before them with Major Reeves at her side, prepared to deliver the news that would reshape the unit's culture and operations. Commander Brooks has been permanently relieved from tactical command and reassigned to administrative duties at Camp Arifjan. Morrison's voice carried across the formation with clear authority. Major Reeves assumes command of this unit effective immediately. This decision follows a formal investigation into command decisions during the contractor compound engagement and broader patterns identified during Commander Brooks's tenure. She paused, allowing the announcement to settle before continuing. The investigation revealed systematic failures in equipment evaluation, specialist employment, and tactical decision-making. These failures created unnecessary risk for American personnel and degraded unit capability. Going forward, this command will implement new policies regarding specialized equipment authorization and expert employment. Morrison outlined the policy changes with specific detail. Specialists with documented expertise would have formal channels to request mission-specific equipment with clear evaluation criteria and timeline requirements for command response. Equipment denials would require written justification tied to specific operational or safety concerns rather than procedural objections. Quarterly reviews would assess whether the unit was properly leveraging available expertise across all functional areas. Captain Sarah Chun is designated Unit Weapons Specialist and Long-Range Training Coordinator. Morrison gestured toward Chun, standing in formation. She will develop training programs to enhance our extended range capability and evaluate equipment optimization opportunities. Her expertise represents exactly the kind of specialized capability this unit needs to embrace rather than suppress. The formation dismissed with soldiers processing the leadership change and its implications. Chun remained behind as Morrison had requested, joining the Colonel and Major Reeves in the command center for initial planning discussions. Captain Chun, your first priority is developing a comprehensive long-range training program. Reeves pulled up a digital planning board. I want doctrine, training schedules, equipment recommendations, and qualification standards. You have 2 weeks to produce the initial framework. Chun nodded. Sir, I'll need access to range facilities, ammunition allocation for testing and training, and authority to work directly with interested shooters from the sniper section. Approved on all counts. Reeves made notes on his tablet. What else do you need? Permission to contact 3 specialists who previously transferred out of this unit. Chun pulled up her phone showing names and contact information. Staff Sergeant Martinez was a demolitions expert who requested custom breach charges. Sergeant Thompson requested enhanced communications equipment. Corporal Vega requested advanced thermal imaging. All 3 requests were denied by Commander Brooks. I'd like to reach out and see if they're interested in returning under the new policies. Morrison looked up from her own planning documents. That's an excellent idea, Captain. Those specialists left because they weren't valued. Bringing them back would send a strong message about the culture change we're implementing. You have my authorization to contact them. Chun spent the afternoon drafting her long-range training program framework. She outlined 3 progressive tiers, starting with fundamental marksmanship principles and building toward advanced techniques for extended distances. Each tier included specific performance standards, equipment requirements, and time allocations. The program emphasized understanding ballistics as engineering rather than treating long-range shooting as mystical skill. She included equipment optimization guidance, showing how shooters could enhance their standard rifles through minor modifications that didn't require complete custom builds. Better triggers, improved optics, and match-grade ammunition could extend effective range significantly without the expense or authorization complexity of fully custom systems. Mitchell appeared in her workspace at 1500 hours, carrying his rifle and a notebook filled with questions. "Captain, I've been studying the ballistic data you showed me. I'd like to optimize my standard rifle using your principles. Where should I start?" Chun cleared space on her desk and had Mitchell lay out his rifle. She examined the trigger pull weight, assessed the optic mounting, and checked the barrel for wear patterns. "Start with the trigger. Your current pull weight is probably 6 to 7 pounds with creep and overtravel. A quality trigger job can bring that down to 3 pounds with clean break. That alone will improve your precision significantly." Mitchell made notes while Chun explained each potential improvement. She recommended a higher quality optic with more precise adjustments, match-grade ammunition for better consistency, and a suppressor to reduce recoil and improve follow-throw observation. None of these modifications required custom barrel work or complete rifle rebuilds, making them accessible within normal procurement channels. "What kind of performance improvement can I expect?" Mitchell asked. "With proper implementation and training, you should extend your reliable engagement range from 600 meters to 800 meters. Chun pulled up comparative data on her laptop. That's a 33% increase in effective distance, which dramatically changes your tactical options. Mitchell studied the data with growing enthusiasm. "This is exactly what the unit needs. I've got 4 other shooters from the sniper section who'll want this training immediately. Send them to me tomorrow morning." Chun returned to her framework document. "We'll start with assessment of their current capability, then develop individual improvement plans based on their specific equipment and skill level." She worked until 1800 hours completing the training framework, then sent it to Reeves and Morrison for review. The document included detailed timelines, resource requirements, and expected outcomes with measurable performance standards. It represented a systematic approach to capability enhancement that balanced immediate improvements with long-term development. Chen's phone rang at 1900 hours with a call from an unfamiliar number. She answered to find Staff Sergeant Martinez on the line, responding to the message Chun had left earlier. "Captain Chun, I got your message about the command change and new policies." Martinez's voice carried cautious interest mixed with skepticism. "I transferred out 6 months ago because Commander Brooks wouldn't authorize the breach charges I needed. Are you telling me that's actually going to change?" Chun explained the investigation results, Brooks's permanent relief, and the new equipment authorization policies that Major Reeves was implementing. She described Morrison's commitment to leveraging specialist expertise and the formal processes now in place to evaluate equipment requests fairly. "I've spent 6 months at Fort Benning teaching basic demolitions to new soldiers." Martinez's tone shifted toward genuine interest. "If you're serious about bringing specialists back and actually using our expertise, I'd consider returning. My current assignment ends in 3 months. I could request reassignment to your unit if the command climate has really changed." "The climate has changed fundamentally, Sergeant." Chun pulled up the new policies on her laptop. "We now have written doctrine that protects specialist equipment requests and requires commanders to provide specific operational justification for any denials. This isn't just about personalities. This is about institutional commitment to capability enhancement. Send me the official policy documents." Martinez made a decision. "If they're as comprehensive as you're describing, I'll submit my reassignment request next week. I designed those breach charges specifically for hardened compound doors we encounter in this theater. They'd be operationally valuable if anyone was willing to authorize their use." Chun sent the policy documents while still on the call, then added Martinez to her contact list for future coordination. She made similar calls to Thompson and Vega, finding both specialists interested in returning under the changed command structure. By 2100 hours, she had commitments from all three to request reassignment within the next 30 days. Morrison reviewed Chin's training framework that evening, making notes and suggestions in the digital margins. The program was thorough and well-structured, balancing ambitious capability goals with realistic resource constraints. She approved it with minor modifications and forwarded it to Regional Command for information, documenting the unit's proactive approach to capability enhancement. The next morning, Chun conducted her first training session with Mitchell and 4 other shooters from the sniper section. She started with diagnostic shooting at 600 meters to establish baseline performance, then worked through fundamental principles of ballistics, wind reading, and equipment optimization. The shooters absorbed the information with focused attention, recognizing they were receiving expert instruction that transcended standard qualification training. One shooter, a sergeant named Rodriguez, raised concerns about whether commanders would support the equipment modifications Chun recommended. We've been told for months that standard equipment is adequate for anything we'll face. How do we know the new command won't revert to that position when it's convenient? Chun addressed the question directly. The new policies require written justification for equipment denials tied to specific operational concerns. Commanders can't simply reject requests based on preference or convenience anymore. And Major Reeves has made specialist employment a priority goal for his command tenure. The institutional framework now supports capability enhancement rather than suppressing it. She demonstrated this commitment by pulling up the formal equipment request form on her laptop. This is the new process. You document your current capability, identify the specific limitation you're addressing, propose the equipment solution with technical justification, and estimate the performance improvement. The commander has 15 days to approve, request additional information, or provide written denial with specific operational reasoning. The shooters examined the form and recognized its significance. The process created accountability and transparency that hadn't existed under Brooks's command. Equipment decisions would now be evaluated on operational merit rather than commander preference. Chun continued the training session through the afternoon, working with each shooter individually to identify their specific improvement opportunities. She emphasized that capability enhancement was iterative rather than revolutionary, building expertise through systematic refinement rather than waiting for perfect equipment or ideal conditions. By the end of the first training day, all 5 shooters had developed personal improvement plans with specific equipment recommendations and performance goals. Chin scheduled follow-up sessions for the next week and assigned reading material covering advanced ballistics and environmental compensation techniques. Major Reeves observed the final hour of training from a distance, noting the engagement and enthusiasm the shooters demonstrated. He approached Chun as the session concluded. "Captain, this is exactly the kind of cultural change I want to see. Specialists teaching specialists, capability building through systematic improvement, commanders supporting rather than suppressing expertise." Chun secured her rifle in its case. "Sir, this unit has the raw talent and operational experience to be exceptional at extended-range precision work. We just needed leadership willing to invest in that development rather than treating it as threatening to command authority. That threat perception ends now." Reeves pulled out his tablet. "I'm authorizing 3,000 rounds of match-grade ammunition for your training program and priority range access 2 days per week. Make this unit the best long-range capable element in the theater." 6 months after Brooks's relief, Chin stood at the range watching 4 shooters engage targets at 900 meters with consistent accuracy. The morning sun cast long shadows across the Afghan landscape while precision rifles cracked in measured rhythm. Each shooter had completed her training program and implemented equipment optimizations that extended their effective range significantly beyond previous unit standards. Rodriguez called his shot and watched through the scope as his round impacted center mass on a torso target at 890 meters. He had upgraded his trigger, installed quality optics, and switched to match-grade ammunition following Chin's recommendations. His qualification scores had improved 40%, and his confidence at extended range showed in every smooth trigger press. Mitchell worked at the 1,000-meter line, the longest distance on the range facility. His optimized rifle and refined technique had pushed his capability well past his previous limitations. He engaged a series of targets with methodical precision, each round connecting where standard equipment would have struggled to reach consistently. Chun moved between shooting positions, offering corrections and guidance, her role having evolved from individual operator to institutional teacher. The training program had grown from 5 initial students to 15 active participants, with another 20 soldiers requesting entry into the next cycle. The cultural shift from suppressing expertise to leveraging it had transformed the unit's approach to specialist employment across all functional areas. Major Reeves arrived at the range in a staff vehicle, accompanied by Colonel Morrison, who was conducting her quarterly assessment of unit readiness. They observed the shooting for several minutes before approaching Chen's position. "Captain Chun, your program has exceeded initial performance projections." Reeves consulted his tablet, showing qualification data. Unit long-range capability has increased 300% over the past 6 months. We've documented 23 successful engagements at ranges exceeding 800 meters, compared to 0 such engagements in the previous year. Morrison studied the shooters through binoculars, noting their professional competence and the quality of their equipment. "How many of your students have implemented full equipment optimization packages?" 8 shooters have completed major upgrades, including triggers, optics, and ammunition changes. Chen pulled up her program tracking data. Another 7 have implemented partial improvements with plans to continue upgrading as budget allows. The key finding is that even modest equipment optimization produces measurable performance gains when combined with proper training. And the 3 specialists who returned to the unit? Morrison lowered her binoculars. How are they performing under the new command structure? Staff Sergeant Martinez has successfully employed his custom breach charges on 4 separate operations, significantly reducing entry time on hardened targets. Chen advanced through her notes. Sergeant Thompson's enhanced communications equipment has improved our signal range by 60% in mountainous terrain. Corporal Vega's thermal imaging system has identified hostile positions at ranges our standard equipment couldn't detect. All 3 specialists report satisfaction with the command climate and equipment authorization process. Reeves made notes on his tablet. Regional Command has requested briefings on our specialist employment model. 2 other units want to implement similar programs based on our documented results. Morrison nodded with professional satisfaction. "Captain Chun, you've been nominated for a Bronze Star for your actions during the contractor engagement. The award ceremony is scheduled for next week. Additionally, I'm recommending you for promotion to Major in assignment as Theater-Wide Weapons Systems Advisor." Chun absorbed this information with her characteristic calm. "Ma'am, I appreciate the recognition, but my priority remains developing this program and ensuring it continues producing results. The program will continue regardless of your individual assignment." Morrison pulled up documentation on her phone. "You've built institutional capacity rather than creating dependency on a single expert. That's the hallmark of effective specialist leadership. The theater needs your expertise at a broader level, developing similar programs across multiple units." The ceremony took place the following week in the compound's central area with a full unit formation in attendance. Morrison presented Chun with the Bronze Star while reading the citation that detailed her precision shooting during the contractor engagement and her subsequent development of training programs that had transformed unit capability. The assembled soldiers recognized her achievement with sustained applause, understanding that her success represented validation of expertise they'd all been encouraged to develop. Brooks's reassignment to Camp Arif Jan had become permanent with no prospect of returning to tactical command. His career had effectively ended at FOB Kandahar, terminated by his refusal to leverage capability that contradicted his procedural certainty. The investigation findings had been distributed through command channels as a case study in failed leadership, his mistakes cataloged for institutional learning. Webb approached Chun after the ceremony, now wearing the rank insignia of platoon sergeant following his own promotion. "Captain, I wanted to thank you for what you've done here. 6 months ago, we had a commander who treated expertise as threatening. Now we have a culture that actively develops and rewards it." Chun adjusted her bronze star on her uniform. "The credit belongs to Colonel Morrison for recognizing the problem and having the courage to address it. I just provided technical capability when it was needed. You provided more than that." Webb gestured toward the shooters on the range. "You showed everyone that specialized knowledge matters, that equipment optimization produces real operational advantages, and that commanders should enable rather than suppress expertise. That's cultural change at a fundamental level." Martinez joined them, carrying his demolitions kit, preparing for an operation scheduled that afternoon. "Captain Chun, my breach charges just got approved for theater-wide distribution based on documented performance. For other demolition specialists are requesting training on the design and employment techniques." Chun pulled out her phone to exchange contact information. "Send them to me next week. We'll set up a technical exchange where you can teach the system and I'll document it for formal training materials." The three specialists stood together in the Afghan sun, representatives of expertise that had been dismissed 6 months earlier and was now being actively cultivated. The institutional transformation had progressed beyond individual success to systematic cultural change. Morrison returned to her office that afternoon and drafted her final assessment report on the command climate improvements. She documented the measurable capability increases, the successful reintegration of transferred specialists, and the broader cultural shift toward expertise leverage. The report concluded with recommendations for implementing similar approaches across the theater, using Chin's program as the template for specialist employment and equipment authorization. She included a section on Brooks's relief as a case study in command failure, emphasizing how ego and procedural rigidity had created unnecessary risk and degraded unit capability. The lessons were clear and supported by comprehensive evidence. Commanders who suppress expertise create institutional weakness. Equipment decisions should be driven by operational merit rather than authority concerns, and specialist knowledge must be actively cultivated rather than viewed as threatening. General Pierce received the report and distributed it through regional command with a directive that all unit commanders review the findings and assess their own approaches to specialist employment. The institutional learning extended beyond FOB Kandahar to influence command philosophy across the theater. Chun worked in her office that evening preparing materials for her transition to the theater advisor role. She compiled training documentation, equipment evaluation protocols, and specialist integration guidelines that would allow other units to replicate her program's success. The work represented systematization of expertise, transforming individual capability into institutional knowledge that would persist beyond any single person's assignment. Mitchell entered her office at 1900 hours carrying a custom rifle he'd built using principles from Chen's training program. "Captain, I wanted to show you this before you transition to your new assignment." He laid the rifle on her desk with obvious pride. Custom barrel, matched trigger, precision optics, hand-loaded ammunition. I followed your development methodology and documented everything for my own reference. Chun examined the rifle with professional appreciation, noting the quality of assembly and the thoughtful component selection. "This is excellent work, Sergeant. What kind of performance are you achieving?" "Half-minute groups at 1,000 meters in Timaleperhor wind." Mitchell pulled out his data book showing testing results. "I've got 3 other shooters working on similar builds now that we have command support for equipment optimization. This is exactly what the program was designed to enable." Chun returned the rifle. "You've gone from operator to builder, understanding the complete system rather than just employing it. That knowledge multiplies throughout the unit as you teach others." She looked around her office at the documentation and equipment that represented 6 months of systematic development. The transformation from dismissed specialist to institutional teacher had been unexpected but profoundly satisfying. Brooks had viewed her expertise as threatening to his authority. Morrison and Reeves had recognized it as capability to be leveraged. The difference in outcomes was absolute and measurable. The evening call to prayer echoed across Kandahar from distant mosques, while Chun continued her transition preparations. Somewhere in Kuwait, Brooks sat at an administrative desk, processing logistics reports, his tactical command career finished by decisions made in defensive procedure over performance. The contrast between their trajectories illustrated the fundamental principle Chun had embodied. Expertise properly employed creates value, while expertise suppressed creates risk. Her phone displayed a message from Regional Command confirming her promotion to Major and assignment as Theater Weapons Systems Advisor effective in 2 weeks. The new role would extend her influence across multiple units, spreading the lessons learned at FOB Kandahar to a broader institutional audience. The custom rifle that had been ridiculed as hobby shop nonsense now represented a validated approach to capability enhancement that was being formalized into theater doctrine. Chun closed her laptop and secured her office, walking across the compound toward the barracks. Above the perimeter walls, stars emerged in the darkening Afghan sky, while the base settled into evening routine. The morning would bring another training session, another opportunity to develop expertise that had once been dismissed and was now actively cultivated. The transformation was complete, the lessons learned, the culture changed. 6 months ago, she'd been assigned to inventory duty with her rifle confiscated. Tonight, she was a decorated major preparing to influence capability development across an entire theater of operations. The difference wasn't luck or circumstance. It was leadership that recognized expertise as an asset rather than a threat, and a commander willing to override rigid authority when lives demanded better judgment. Have you ever had your skills dismissed only to prove everyone wrong? Share your story in the comments.